Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 12th, 2019. Are we sure we want to do this thing? Okay. We're ready to roll with yet another show. That is to say, it is 9 o'clock. I'm here, and you're here, and it's our time, so let's get started. Let's see. This morning, I don't know, most of Twitter seems to be occupied by Trump yelling at Greta Thunberg because she won Person of the Year at Time Magazine and he didn't. And that's kind of what we're obsessed with this morning. And it's amazing, of course, that, you know, like a full-grown human person would be upset by something like that. But that's what he's spending his time on. I don't know whether he did it last night or this morning. I didn't check. It really doesn't matter that much. But everybody's picking up on it. Greta Thunberg herself has picked up on it. What did he say? He tweeted something petty like, it's so ridiculous. She needs to work on her anger management problem, which is about as projection a statement as anybody could possibly make. And go to an old-fashioned movie with her friends or whatever. I don't even know what that was supposed to be. Chill, Greta, chill. And, further embarrassment. What can you do? But, there's a lot on his mind. The House Judiciary Committee, I guess, will finish up their markup of the articles of impeachment today. I would guess that puts the articles of impeachment on the floor of the House probably. I mean, they could engineer it to get that done tomorrow or over the weekend if they want to make everybody stay, but I don't think they're going to get that. Probably early next week, and then what do we do? Well, at that point, then you'll have your vote, and process kicks in, although there's a little room to manipulate the process. I would take advantage of that, especially if they're not going to start the trial until after the new year anyway. You might as well take your time with the engrossment process and having the speaker sign the resolution carrying the articles, and maybe take your time sending the messenger over to the Senate. I'm not getting too enthused about things. Yes, we discussed yesterday that with Joan that McConnell is still sticking to the idea that he will actually go ahead and hold a Senate trial. He's not going to try and buck the usual rules and procedures that much. But I understand he is working on engineering a trial without witnesses, because that's exactly the way the American people understand trials to work. Well, they won't know the difference, I'm sure, and we'll see what happens. I guess we'll get to that article. We'll read through it, analyze exactly what he's doing and why. Unless, we may go over that with Greg. That may be on his list. I have to check his list. If not, we'll get to it. It's procedure. We'll take an interest in it. Here we are, though. Daily Coast Radio now being live, as we are told by Bill in Portland, Maine, who says, well, let's see. I was going to promote, he says, what Kagro X, that's me, we'll be talking about today, but his check still hasn't cleared, so stay tuned. Very soon. 2 weeks, maybe sooner. We'll see what happens. That's the way it goes. I promise he'll be paid in full because I always honor my debts. I can't do that in his voice. No one has ever heard him say that before. All right. So, let's see. We've got, as I said, a raft of stories here prepared by Greg. As a matter of fact, why don't I open up, pardon me, already starting this morning. Everything has reset, so we'll have to open everything up all over again and get back into Pocket. And there's an awful lot today. There's so many loose threads that probably enough revolving around impeachment alone that we haven't caught up with that need our time. So we'll be doing that and the procedural aspects of it, and what's up with Lev Parnas. He's back in the news and back in trouble again. Plenty to discuss about Bill Barr and the necessity of impeaching that guy as well. I can see there's still a lot of work to do, I would guess, in the House, or I would say in the House, with regard to impeachment. I think they're packing up and decamping, but honestly, both the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee should be continuing their work. After all, the charges that they handed over is that there's an ongoing attempt to engineer foreign interference and steal the next election. I don't know what else the Intelligence Committee would do with its time between now and the election other than continue to investigate that, but I wonder whether that's on their agenda. Well, I guess we'll see what happens once again. But all right, well, let's do another roundup of another sorts. Everything that you've collected for the morning, Greg, is lined up before us. How you doing?
Hi, good morning. Skype just told me it had an update, so hopefully it works and stuff.
Yeah, the update is we decided to erase everybody and start over. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. So let's start with impeachment. And one thing of interest, of course, is the new Daily Kos Civics poll that's out this morning. Most Americans think Trump committed impeachable offenses. When I say most Americans, 53%, yes, he has, and 45%, no, he hasn't.
I see. That is most.
So that's most. It's more than 50%. The majority of Americans believe things have gotten worse for the country, 54%, and 54% of Americans also disapprove of Trump's job performance. Interestingly, there's always a few percentage people who think that Trump committed impeachable offenses but don't want him removed.
Yeah, I guess there are such people.
There's an 8-point gap in, yeah, he did it, and like 5-point gap in, yeah, you should remove him. So what do the other people think? Probably something along the lines of, look, he did it, let me take care of it. And I will take care of it in the next election.
Oh, okay. Well, what happened to most Americans? Where are they?
Well, most Americans are still, in that category there.
All right. Well, that's
so if you look at the question of should you remove or should you impeach, it's still 51-46 if you're looking at the the daily polls. But this most recent survey collecting things really just points to the fact that once Pelosi decided to go the impeachment route, Americans kind of made up their mind. And very little has happened since then, including the hearings that have changed anybody's mind. What has happened, though, is that Republican responses have, shall we say, evolved. For people who don't believe in evolution, just look at the Republican Party. They basically went from, this is nonsense, he didn't do it, so to, of course he did it, but what difference does it make, to, I don't even want to talk about whether he did it or whether he didn't do it, as we saw on display last night and probably today, are yelly Republicans screaming at the Democrats, you've always hated us. You hate us now. You're going to hate us tomorrow. That's all this is. You want to disenfranchise 63 million people. Forget about the 66 million people who voted the other way.
Can I?
You hate us. You just hate us. That's all. You've always hated us, and you're probably going to hate us. And I'm thinking, well, you're giving us pretty good reason to hate you, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I feel justified. Thank you.
If you didn't before, you certainly do now. As Tom Nichols, who was following this yesterday, points, I think to understand Trump and the cultishness, you really have to internalize how much people really want to believe that they're finally getting even with the other people who think they are responsible for the condition of their lives. I mean, it's crazy, but it's powerful stuff. So Republicans are really mad at Democrats and hate Democrats because Democrats are responsible for the fact that Republicans are who they are.
Well, we control everything.
Must be punished. And this is all about crime and punishment. If you're an authoritarian, whether you're a white evangelical or whether you're a Republican, you believe that people are supposed to do what you tell them. And if they don't, then you have every right to be in their face about it. I mean, that's basically the Republican Party these days.
Yes.
And so you just see that on display. It's pretty amazing. And there are people who kind of exemplify that, the Jim Jordans of the world, who basically, take off their jacket and then just start yelling and jumping on the table whenever possible.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they think that's effective. I really don't know why they think it's effective. They don't get any new voters. They've given up on that. It's only a question of keeping who they already have. How well is that working? It's really hard to say, and it's probably going to be impossible to say. Nobody's going to want to say because after 2016, nobody wants to predict. But the fact is that Trump, in all the polls, is still stuck in the low 40s in terms of his head-to-heads against other people running on the Democratic side, no matter which that candidate is. And so that doesn't really help us to know for sure what's going to happen. But you do look at other signs, symptoms. For example, recent CNN polling that shows that basically Joe Biden is tied with Trump in Texas, that in Arizona, Kelly is running ahead of McSally, the Democrats running ahead of the Republican by 10 points in Maricopa County, which is responsible for 60% of the votes in Arizona. And, you just have to wonder, I get all the commentators explaining to us that, well, this is all the Fox News vote and it's his base. And what about his base? Forget about her emails. What about his base? It's but his base. And you have to go to the diners in Pennsylvania to really understand this stuff. But, I'm just not necessarily seeing it. This isn't a landslide against Trump by any means. It's going to be a very close election. But I don't see him doing what he's supposed to be doing in the areas that he needs to do it in. Yeah. If he's competitive in Texas,
I hope so.
And if 60% of Maricopa is willing to vote for a Democratic senator, then I don't think those are pretty good signs and portents for Trump getting reelected.
How many Pennsylvania diners are there in Arizona?
Well, if you can't find any Pennsylvania diners, you can always find West Virginia diners.
Yes, they're everywhere. It doesn't matter. We put
there's a cadre of people in this country who are committed to voting for Trump. I get that. It's never been a majority. Even his own supporters don't think it's a majority. And so, until and unless we wind up having a Democratic candidate for the Democrats to rally around, it's always, the polls are always going to be kind of a balance between whoever is running, let's substitute generic Democrat on the one hand, and on the other hand, when you're in primary mode, it's only my candidate is correct and everybody else is a disaster who's going to give the election to the other side. And you always have to get past that before you have a really meaningful sense of where things are at. So in the midst of all of this,
where are they at?
We have the Democrats and the impeachment circus. And today is the day that the committee at least will vote on the articles and then send them to the full House, and the House will vote on them next week, and then we'll have the trial in the Senate. Now, interestingly, there's all sorts of trial balloons being floated about what the Senate trial is going to look like.
Trial balloons.
Oh, maybe it'll be really fast. Maybe we won't even have any witnesses. Maybe it'll just be like an hour. We have the votes. We'll do whatever. And we talked about this the other day. Well, who sets that procedure? And the answer is the Senate sets its own procedure, but, they have to have the votes to do it. So we'll see how that happens. A lot of the senators, like Susan Collins, don't want what looks like an obvious kangaroo court. Oh, by the way, I looked up kangaroo court.
Oh, yes?
Wanted to know where that came from. So scholars trace its origin, according to Quora, to the historical practice of itinerant judges in the U.S. frontier. The term kangaroo court comes from the image of those judges hopping from place to place, guided less by concern for justice than by the desire to wrap it up and get as many trials in as the day allowed. Then get back on your horse and go somewhere else.
Right. Why it's not a horse court, I don't know. But they hop.
Well, it's the bouncing.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay. Well, that's what they had. That's what they went with. Kangaroo court. It's a lot better, and it's alliterative. Horse court. So you could have a horse court.
Yeah, and bunny court just doesn't do it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that does take away from things. And horse court might be like traffic court back then.
Right. So, and too confused with horse thief,
Right. Well, that's for the horse court.
It's like a really bad thing.
It takes care of those horse thieves.
So anyway, while all this is going on, what's happening? The Republicans are becoming more and more screaming at the camera, and Trump is just becoming more and more manic. I think he's tweeted like, most of these are retweets, but he's tweeted like 100 times today already.
Awesome.
And, among his targets are important people like Greta Thunberg.
Yes. And remember, you can't indict a sitting president because it would be a violation of his, it would be a huge national security problem to distract him from his extremely important job. That's why we're not indicting him.
Right. So picking on somebody with Asperger's, well, I don't know, whose name isn't Barron.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I just you throw your hands up and say, okay, I don't even understand what he thinks his job is.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's totally like 100% with it there.
He's not. You know, that's true. And
But
to be
but
fair,
even if
he
that's
is
true,
an
I mean, the
Asperger.
point I'm trying to make is that it's getting under their skin. They hate this. They hate you, and they're going to take it out on you because they hate this. And of course, as the Democrats keep saying, we don't want to do this. But, we have to do this based on what's going on here. And just what strikes me is the total asymmetry. And I was talking with several people in the business on Twitter yesterday, that is to say political people or people who interact with those who do this for a living. And the mindset between the two parties is just so vastly different. Republicans look at everything in terms of how does this help us win, or what's in it for me, or what's the power here. And Democrats are always torn by, but, I got to balance that with doing the right thing. And Republicans say, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. That's a different language. You have to explain. It's a Klingon. I don't understand.
The right thing
what
is
do
the
you mean
winning
right
thing.
That's not even part of our vocabulary here.
It's yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's almost, if you think about it, a coherent philosophy. For Republicans, the right thing equals the winning thing, and it comes in some sense from
there is nothing else. Don't even bring anything else into it.
Prosperity gospel. You win because you're right.
Yeah,
God wants you to.
And we've talked about this before, but it's so weird to see it so nakedly displayed here, because that's what's going on. They are truly upset because you're threatening their power, and so that's why they're screaming. And you're going to have the inevitable articles. You have one this morning, for example, in the Washington Post. House Democrats brace for some defections among moderates on impeachment of Trump. Here you have people who are sitting trying to decide what's the right thing for their constituency and themselves, in terms of getting reelected, and they're balancing it, and they're thinking it through. And oh my God, that kind of hesitation is something that has to be written up. Republicans would never do that. They're all in on, of course we're going to do this, and we're going to line up, and do what we're told. And of course the other side is going to be torn. And that's going to send messages to people.
Messages.
What kind of messages? Well, I don't know. It's just messages.
Right, yes. There have been messages sent all over the place.
Well, here's the message. The Democrats have enough votes to impeach, and Trump's going to be impeached. And if individual members aren't going to be whipped and they need to do what they feel like they need to do in their own constituency, whether it's Jeff Van Drew in New Jersey, who will probably vote no on both of these things because he hasn't been convinced that it's in his own interest to vote for the public's interest. Well, fine. He's announced that beforehand, and that's probably true. This article is focusing on some of the national security moderates who wrote the op-ed in the Washington Post that said, we don't want to do this, but we have to do this. And so if you interview them now, guess what? They don't want to do it, but they feel like they have to do it.
Okay.
I'm still thinking it over, said Representative Susie Lee, a centrist who hails from GOP-leaning Nevada district Trump carried in 2016. It's a grave decision. I'm hearing all sides. Josh Gottheimer, Democrat, New Jersey, another centrist Democrat who attended a session Monday night in which moderates discussed the concerns. I've said all along I need to see all the facts. I'm not going to prejudge anything. And it isn't even a question about whether or not they have the votes. Of course they have the votes. You have people who, like Elizabeth Slotkin, or I guess is from Michigan, is going to say, gee, I'm hearing from all sides. Now, I don't know if they expected it was going to be easy. Of course they didn't. Colin Peterson and Jeff Van Drew are already going to oppose. We know that. Peterson said he's leaning toward opposing the charges but hasn't made up his mind. But he was a no. So, there's a lot of people who are wrestling with this because you know what? It's not an easy and simple situation. And one of the things I hate about political reporting is trying to just make it all horse race, all times, under all circumstances. Like the fact of the matter is, this is a really serious thing to do. It's historic. And if some people want to take their time and think about what they want to do, that's fine. And if some of them decide they just can't do it because, like, only for the third or fourth time, depending upon how you count things, we're going to do this, well, fine. The important thing is that most of the Democrats do this. I don't really care whether it's unanimous or not. That doesn't send any kind of signal.
Well, yeah. I mean, pundits need something to write about, so they're doing that. And yeah, I mean, what's most irritating is when it's literally one or two out of 200 plus Democrats who do this they think that there's some sort of message or trend involved there, and it's very often quite clear that there really isn't. Colin Peterson is almost always putting himself on the other side of important questions like this. That's his positioning. It's always been his thing.
Yeah.
There he is.
There he is. I mean, the phone's ringing off the hook, says Alyssa Slotkin, one of the half dozen national security centers who endorse impeachment in the post-op-ed.
Yes.
And she says, literally, my team cannot pick up the phone fast enough because it's constantly ringing. Well, I get it. That's what happens at my house, too.
Yeah.
Slotkin, who represents a Trump district, said she's not decided how she will vote. While her district is overall not supportive of impeachment, she said some votes require members to go with the gut over constituents' wishes.
Yeah.
And I'm very comfortable in doing that because my world is national security.
Okay. Well, yeah, then you have more work to do also.
Right. Now, not all moderates are skittish. Jason Crow, Democrat, Colorado, one of the earliest battleground district Democrats to back impeachment, indicated he's pleased with the investigation.
Okay.
So there you go. I mean, so again, it's something to write about. You keep, you don't want to just write about Jim Jordan taking his jacket off and yelling and screaming all the time. I get that. This is a little bit more interesting. But you still have to put all of this into perspective. Trump did some really bad things. It's pretty obvious. The Democrats have nailed him on it. The Republicans aren't even trying to defend him. They're going with the never mind what he did or what he didn't do. The important thing is you hate us, and we have to stick together against you haters. And that's really going to be their defense. Meanwhile, in the real world, yesterday, Bloomberg posts this. Giuliani ally Lev Parnas got $1 million from Russia, U.S. says.
That's probably
Prosecutors asked judge to revoke Parnas's bail and send him to jail. The Russia payment raises questions about the nature of Parnas's work.
Yes, to say the very, very least.
And that's Rudy's associate, Lev Parnas, which they actually start the article with. Rudy Giuliani's associate, Lev Parnas, got $1 million from an account in Russia in September, a month before he was charged with conspiring to funnel foreign money into U.S. political campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if Rudy Giuliani's associate is being paid by the Russians,
yes,
what does that mean?
He's under Russian influence, and
that's what it would mean to me.
Yes.
In other words, everything that the Democrats said that Trump needs to be impeached for is happening.
Right.
It's real.
Yes.
It isn't just because we hate everybody who voted for him.
I will also point out that in September of this year, when he got a $1 million payment from Russia, he owed Rudy Giuliani $500,000. So suddenly $1 million showed up, and it came from Russia. And what you're supposed to take away from that I guess no one else feels comfortable saying, Rudy Giuliani is also being paid by Russia. Thank you.
Right.
Just thought I'd point that out for everybody, and I hope you heard it clearly.
Yeah. So, just again, looking at the background here in terms of the rapid-paced week, Sarah Binder has a nice little summary in the Washington Post here. They went with skinny impeachment to try to get the most Democratic votes.
Nice. Yes.
Right. Probably wasn't a hard sell for Pelosi. She didn't want to endorse this in the first place. When those 7 Democrats that we were just talking about, the security Democrats like Slotkin, jumped on board, several dozen of their colleagues, largely from purple, not blue districts, had yet to sign on. Keeping a hold on the House in the 2020 election has been important all year. So remember, Pelosi's juggling a lot of different things, as we said the other day, chainsaws and cats. So that's one thing. Number 2, the impeachment plus trade legislation, it's a package deal. Exploiting deadlines to secure a deal is hardly a novel tactic. In this case, Pelosi used the pressure of the coming recess to link a narrowly drawn impeachment with a trade deal favored by swing district Democrats. Pelosi's move signaled that Democratic control of the House and her speakership remain her top priorities. Of course, she might have wagered that this new NAFTA, that's what we're calling it, NAFTA 2.0, we're not giving it Trump's name, gives Trump less bang for the buck than he imagines. And, of course, nobody's really talking about that today. So all of the angst about how can you give Trump a win, Trump isn't worrying about his win. He's worrying about impeachment. That's why he's tweeting like a maniac today. And then number 3, look for stress fractures in the Senate. And as yourself, Sarah Bond, who's my other expert, I go to about rules. And what she says is Senate rules stipulate the basic parameters for a trial, leaving leaders to negotiate finer details like whether or not witnesses to call. The Senate impeachment rules allow a majority of the Senate to determine these additional details. In 1999, Democratic and Republican leaders negotiated an initial agreement that the Senate unanimously adopted to govern the Clinton impeachment trial. But that unity fractured on the second resolution, leaving a partisan majority to set the final parameters of the trial. Mr. McConnell has said that he would consider a deal with the Democratic leader, Schumer. But if they can't agree, he'll need to get enough Republicans to agree on how to run the trial. That means he'll need to persuade some swing state senators who face voters this coming November. That would be like Susan Collins. And what type of trial would 51 senators agree to? Senators have already warned the White House there's no appetite to put on a big show, nor is it clear that 51 Republicans will support a motion to dismiss the trial before senators reach the votes on whether to convict. And the shorter the trial, the more Senate floor time Republicans will have to confirm more federal judges, which is a top priority for them. But the half a dozen or so swing state senators up for re-election may insist the trial appear meatier than that, complicating McConnell's ability to hold his conference together. Oh, my goodness, this is like a Republicans in disarray article.
Yeah.
If that happens, Democrats could have some influence over trial procedures. Of course, McConnell could use the threat of losing control to the Democrats to keep GOP senators on the same page and the White House at bay. The need to impeach a president has become a remarkably partisan affair, but internal rifts still matter. So, again, it doesn't mean that any of the Republicans will vote to remove or impeach and convict, because that's their job.
Right.
But it's just never as simple as it seems, and it isn't as simple as, oh, well, everybody knows what's going to happen. We don't.
That's true. There may yet be complications. Which article was it you were just reading from?
I will send that to you on the break, and after the break, we'll talk a little bit about merry old England.
Okay, excellent. They are very merry today, as I understand it, on their way to the polls. Is that right?
Yeah, they should be voting now, which is, by the way, is part of the problem.
All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 minutes to discuss it.
You're not allowed to talk about it, but they did.
Oh. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to Kagro on the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Continuing on with Greg Dworkin. It appears they're impeaching the president. That's happening right now, by the way, in case you were wondering. The Judiciary Committee back in session beginning at 9 a.m. because they knew it would interrupt our show. And they love teasing us with that stuff. Right.
So Sharice Davids comes out in support of Trump impeachment. The facts are uncontested, she says.
Oh, well.
She's Democrat Kansas.
Okay.
She didn't arrive at her decision to back the charges of obstruction, abuse of power lightly. It's not what I came to do. Right. It may hurt her in her district. So what? You got to do what's right.
Did she say it like this?
I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to do that. They're not going to just say, oh, I decided the day I came here that I was going to do this. Al Green might have.
Yeah, and a few others probably.
And it's not that they're wrong, but it's not good politics in certain districts. It's just, that's a fact.
Some places it's great.
Yeah, but other places it doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. She's appropriately reluctant. Do you think she said? I think she probably said it a little less.
Yeah, it's in sorrow, not in anger.
In sorrow, not.
But you got to do what you got to do. Now, Michael Freeman, my conservative friend on Twitter, points out in normal times, the president of the United States paying a couple of $1 million in damages for running a scam charity would be a major story. And by the way, that the Trump children were sent to re-education camp. Real Donald Trump, says David Farenthold of the Washington Post, has paid the $2 million in court-ordered damages for misusing the money in a tax-exempt charity he controlled, and the kids have to take special don't do this again lessons.
Re-education camp. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that's all going on. Meanwhile, in England, we got an election there.
Right. England. Yes.
We have new elections also in Israel because the two sides couldn't agree on who was going to run the place. And so a third election is coming up in March. And in the meantime, Netanyahu's been indicted, so we'll see what happens. But in England, here's Jenny Russell contributing, opinion writer, can Boris Johnson lie his way back into office? Britons face a miserable set of choices. The two candidates are bad. This is the dejection election. The two candidates are so alarming that in an unprecedented intervention, former prime ministers from each of their parties have pleaded with voters to block them. Tony Blair and John Major have heard tactical votes against Mr. Corbyn and Mr. Johnson. Everywhere, exhausted, disillusioned, skeptical voters debate who's worse. British politics has never known anything like it. These very different men share remarkable, unflattering similarities. Each is ill-briefed, hazy on facts and implications of his policy proposals, uneasy under scrutiny, and belligerent when challenged, and both are promising rank impossibilities. Mr. Johnson tells voters he can deliver Brexit quickly and painlessly, and Mr. Corbyn claims it's possible to drastically transform the economy for ordinary people in 5 years, raising productivity and living standards, ending tuition fees, and nationalizing rail, water, and energy, all paid for by just modestly raising taxes for businessmen and top earners. Neither man is telling the truth. Both are addressing real acute problems with consoling fantasies. One of the things that is striking, though, is, again, in opinion polls, that Jeremy Corbyn is one of the most unpopular British leaders in history, in the history of polling. Which makes catching up with the Conservatives in today's vote somewhat difficult. Now, all the polls have the Conservatives ahead by about 8 or 9 points. But what happened with this postal controversy, which we alluded to just before the break, is a story in The Guardian. BBC denies Laura Kusenberg's postal vote comments broke the law. The BBC says its political editor, Laura Kusenberg, did not break electoral law when she reported claims that postal ballots painted a grim picture for Labour. Kusenberg told viewers on Wednesday that while parties were not supposed to look at voting papers when they're verified but not counted at opening sessions, they did get a hint of how they were doing, and it was not looking good for Labour. She said the forecast is going to be wet and cold tomorrow. The postal votes have already arrived. The parties, they're not meant to look at it, but they do kind of get a hint. Both sides say it's looking pretty grim for Labour in a lot of parts of the country. And then she added, of course, postal voters tend to skew to elderly voters and people who vote early. And the younger generation, who we know skew much more to Labour, you might expect to turn out in the polls tomorrow. So she's not trying to make a prediction from it. She's just pointing out the obvious, that this is the category of people who vote early, and these are the categories of people who vote on same day. And we do this all the time when we have early voting data and say, gee, it looks really good for X, but it doesn't really matter because you don't know if you're cannibalizing your vote on election day or whether this always skews in this particular direction. And so it's tea leaves, and that's all it is. And it's certainly not telling you what to vote or how to do this.
Yeah, we don't have any laws about that, though.
Now, in England, you're not allowed to do that, especially 24 hours prior to an election. I don't even think you're allowed to talk about it the day of the vote. They're very strict about that.
I mean, can you say they're voting?
Don't
forget to vote?
You can say they're voting, but you can't say anything else about it until the vote's done.
I'm just curious. How strict is it? You just get on there
So
and
the
say,
Electoral Commission issued a statement on Wednesday warning against revealing results. It may be an offense to communicate any information obtained at postal vote opening sessions, including about votes cast before a poll has closed. Anyone with information to suggest this has happened should report it immediately to the police.
I have some information suggesting it.
Oh, I'm going to report you to the police.
Oh. No, I'm supposed to report.
Oh, okay.
You don't report me unless I don't report
well,
it.
It's very confusing.
I don't know. They don't have any guns, I don't think, the police, so I can do whatever.
Anyway, so we won't know till overnight, and then we'll know tomorrow. And there's always surprises, and, Labor has done a little bit better in the polls, meaning they're not trailing by as much as they were. Whether that's a trend or whether it matters, it's basically a 10-point lead for the Conservatives. And in some of the models, that's enough to give them a majority. And in others of the models, it's not. The Brexit party has pretty much collapsed and doesn't exist. The only question is how many are going to vote for Labour, how many are going to vote for Lib Dems, and is it going to be tactical voting in various constituencies, what they call districts, so that a certain vote goes a certain way, denying the seat to the Conservatives. We don't know that yet. We're going to see. So we'll find out more tomorrow. But, it's likely the Conservatives will win. And then Boris Johnson will have his opportunity to show everybody that he was right. He can get England out of the European Union and have a Britain leaves, Britain exit, Brexit. And, of course, he can do it in a way that's not disruptive and everybody doesn't hate him. So we shall see.
I can't imagine. I don't know what to say. I mean, why would that work? He just did it. He just tried and failed miserably like 15 times. And
right.
I don't know. But I guess just like here, there's just a base and they're going to do it.
Right, exactly. So, never mind reality. The question is, how do you appeal to the base?
All right.
So, interesting times.
You're not allowed to listen to
sometimes
this
you have to go right up to the wall, right up to the ditch, right up to the edge of the cliff, and see who jumps off and who doesn't. And sometimes people don't jump, and sometimes they do. So we'll see.
They have got cliffs. So
yeah, lemmings. I'm thinking of lemmings. And so we know that the Republican Party in our country is a bunch of lemmings. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens over there with the Conservatives.
Yes. Well, hopefully they, too, will find cliffs.
So that's basically pretty much all the news I wanted to talk about.
Oh, all right. And some of it we weren't even allowed to talk about, and we did anyway.
Right. Here's another interesting one, just for those of you who think, never mind that, prosperity gospel is good, get rich quick. 5 people have been charged with defrauding investors of $722 million using promises of huge returns if they joined a cryptocurrency investing club. I mean, that sounded legitimate.
Only 5?
Wouldn't you have just jumped on board and done that right away?
Yes, I have already put $1 million into it.
Yeah, but it's, of course, $1 million of cryptocurrency, so nobody knows.
Yes.
It's not your money
either. Yeah.
Because, what could go wrong?
Those sorts of things usually work out pretty good.
Right. The fun part is federal prosecutors said the defendants operated Bit Club Network, a bogus investment scheme that they promoted as the most transparent company in the history of the world and too big to fail.
That's
right?
a good
It makes
line.
you laugh, doesn't it?
Really. We're the most transparent company in the world, and we're too big to fail.
Right. 5 people have been charged with defrauding investors using promises of huge returns if they joined a cryptocurrency club while privately deriding their clients as sheep and idiots.
Well, at least they were transparent about that. Although they tried to do it privately, but their encryption was broken.
So the network asked investors to join a pool to share in the earnings from Bitcoin mining, in which people race to unlock new Bitcoin by solving complex algorithms and verifying cryptocurrency transactions on a public ledger. The network said it would invest in the hardware necessary to do the complex math, and its investors would reap the rewards, much like investors in a gold mining operation. You're not going to start digging holes. The gold miners dig up the gold. They just give you the gold every day.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing,
No, I don't really know.
No,
I mean,
I don't really know either. But apparently some people thought so, and they invested enough to lose $700 million.
That's amazing. So that's the idea is you do math problems that are so hard that you become rich. I'm not seeing it, but all right. I mean, at one point, somebody explained cryptocurrency at one point and almost made sense of it. But how you say, how you promise to be transparent on crypto anything, I don't really understand. Even just as from a language perspective, I know you're lying.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So there's always that. That's always fun to think about. So I'm going to leave. We'll see what's on TV and whether or not they're covering any of people yelling at each other. And we'll be back on Monday, right? I mean,
if the
you're
country
off Tuesday,
we'll be.
But Monday should be okay.
Yeah, right. Unless they decide, I don't know, to start pounding on the roof on Monday. I have no plans for that. It should be Tuesday. Should be fine. All goes well, assuming there's a country and, radio and internet. We'll try it.
All right. Well, by the time
touch and go,
by the time we talk again on Monday, the UK should have sorted out who won the election. Maybe.
That's nice. Good for you.
Possibly.
Try it. See what happens. Israel, not yet, right?
Israel, not till March.
Okay.
And even then, maybe there'll be a 5th and a 6th and a 7th election. Who knows? People are kind of dug in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait and see. Not too much to worry about that I don't think we've warned you of over the weekend. Good luck to the UK coming out the other end of this thing. And tell us maybe kind of sort of who won on Monday. Okay.
All righty.
I can wait
Take
that
care.
long.
Talk to you
Very
then.
good. You do the same. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. I don't know. Have a crumpet, I guess. And sit back and relax. Okay. Man. So, yeah, now I'm just sort of thinking more about the cryptocurrency thing. It has always been, a little difficult to understand, to say the very least. And at one point, I almost had a grasp of why it was, and I've forgotten by now what the explanation was. But somebody put a decent one together that explained how making a computer solve a complex mathematical problem was somehow convertible into money, but it disappeared from my brain almost as soon as I got it. But I don't know. I mean, so they've been promising to make people rich for a long time, and so far, for the vast majority of people who've invested in it, I don't think that it has worked. So I don't really know what to tell you about people putting huge amounts of money into that as an investment. But things are weird. I mean, the investments don't make any sense either in a very real way. I just saw something the other day. What was it? Did I actually pocket this thing because it was such a dumb story? I couldn't even believe it. But it doesn't have anything to do with politics, so I may not have put it aside. But I don't know if you saw this thing. The collapse of you'll be amazed. A .com tech type startup that collapsed. But it was another scooter thing. Like, how do you even convince venture capitalists to back you in getting into the internet scooter sector at this point? Because, first of all, what are you talking about? An internet scooter? But secondly, I would say there's already like 15 players in this space, but you're 16th. I'm gonna disrupt the whole internet scooter business. This one was called Unicorn Scooters, and true to the name, it turned out not to be real. But their big disruptive move here was, well, we're still going to be playing in the internet scooter sector. And again, it's like, what does that even mean? And I got the picture for these other scooter companies where they would have scooters located all over the city, and you could use the internet via your phone to rent one of these scooters, and it would activate, and you could, scoot, I guess, around town, and then you put it at a docking station somewhere else and return the thing. And others were like, not even, I don't know, you don't put it at a docking station, you just leave it where it is. And so there were a couple of variants of it out there. But the big exciting innovation was you would give your customers the ability to ride all around town whenever they wanted to on an electric scooter without having to buy an electric scooter. That was at least an interesting idea. Unicorn Scooters' idea was, here's the groundbreaker, here's the game changer. Instead of using the internet to rent people scooters, why don't we use the internet to sell people scooters? And then they would own their own scooters, and then they would scoot all around town, and then I can't really remember why the internet was involved after that. But somebody said, yeah, here's a couple $1 million because why not? And they may have known what they were doing in terms of like, well, I'm investing in a scooter company and they sell scooters to people, and they weren't trying to think of it as Unicorn was, or somehow playing in this weird space and disrupting the internet scooter rental market by creating an internet scooter sales market, because there already was one. But I don't know. They did it. And anyway, the thing is, it collapsed in a very spectacular way. And I mean, I should grab the article. It was around there somewhere. But I mean, maybe I won't read it to you, but I'll see if I can find it. Note to self here, right? Unicorn Scooters. And I'll give you the article for you to read over the weekend or something. It was just dumb because what ended up happening was they were selling the scooters for about $600, $650, something like that. And they had people, there's enough people in the world that someone will say, I'll buy one of these scooters that are so strange or interesting, plus internet, that it costs $650. And they did it. And the company, this is what you do as one of these companies. You would collect the money and then you would use it ordinarily to make the scooters and then deliver the scooters to people. But their angle, and maybe this was what interested investors, was we will take the money and we will not build the scooters and we will keep the money, which is ordinarily just a scam. But somehow, because internet, nobody's being arrested. But anyway, that's what happened. People sent their $650 and they didn't get a scooter, and Unicorn closed down and announced, we are also not going to give you those scooters. And why not? Or why won't you give me the scooter? And the answer was, we spent all of the money you sent us on Facebook advertising to get people to, they're aware of the fact that they could give us $650 for a scooter. But that's not an answer. But somehow, or like I said, you do that and only that, you're going to jail. You do that plus internet, and you're an innovator, and you're giving TED Talks, and the company closes, and you still have $1 billion in valuation, and I don't know what to tell you. That's the way it works these days. Okay, just moving on, because that's too frustrating to continue with. Let's see. Like I said, many, and also a couple other many things to deal with. The Pocket feed is two pictures of Bill Barr, 2 pictures of Donald Trump, 1 picture of Mitch McConnell, and then a imposing picture of the White House. There's a lot out there. Let's start with the one of the White House. This is a Washington Post piece declaring that in a new legal memo, and legal memos are great. They're awesome things. Everyone loves them. The White House Budget Office defends withholding aid to Ukraine. So now they're now back to the position that there was nothing wrong with what they did. It's untenable, and there's no point really in trying to justify this thing. I think several months after the fact, and I don't know. I guess we'll go see what their memo has to say. But the plain fact is that you can't do it in secret and then come up with a memo that says, here's our rationale. The memo is supposed to come along with the withholding of the aid, and it's supposed to be delivered to Congress to give them an opportunity to decide whether or not they're going to sanction this withholding. So Jeff Stein and Josh Dawsey have written this piece. And here's what we got. The White House Budget Office asserts in a new legal memo that it withheld military aid to Ukraine as a temporary move to study whether the spending complied with U.S. policy and not as a political effort to block Congress's spending decisions. Either way, of course, Congress has made a political decision to spend that money, and you really do need to notify them of what you're doing, especially, whether it's temporary or not. And of course, it's the job of Congress to oversee whether or not the spending is complying with U.S. policy. But I suppose there's a role you could certainly play in the executive branch for that. But I guess that's another interesting thing. Here's the memo. Where is the evidence that you were conducting the study? I mean, there would be receipts from the study, right? But there aren't. The office first began discussing the aid on June 19th, the day President Trump learned of the aid. Because he's dumb. But guess what? He learned of the aid from an article in the Washington Examiner and questioned the wisdom of the spending. Now, mind you, this aid was in a spending bill, an appropriations bill that he signed. Not all presidents know everything that is in every appropriations bill that they sign, to be sure, but that is why there are briefings and why you're supposed to do your reading. And for a person so terribly, terribly concerned with corruption in Ukraine. I mean, an overwhelming concern. They've always been terrible, terrible people, right? The whole place is corrupt and it's full of terrible people. But don't tell me anything about any aid that's going to Ukraine. Just let me find out about it in whatever newspapers happen to cross my desk. So there you go. He read a newspaper. Of course, it was the Washington Examiner, which is garbage. And the Examiner questioned the wisdom of the spending, so he did too. That move sent aid scrambling, according to a senior administration official who spoke on condition of anonymity. The Office of Management and Budget extended the temporary hold on the aid 8 times in August and September, the last time being September 10th. Almost immediately after that hold, the money was released because they got caught, according to the new memo, which was reviewed by the Washington Post. The memo details the White House's latest legal rationale for freezing foreign aid to Ukraine over the summer. OMB General Counsel Mark Paoletta wrote the memo to respond to a request from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which had asked why the aid had been delayed. Now you might ask why the response was so delayed. Those delays are now at the center of the House Democrats' accelerating impeachment probe of Trump. And I mean, this is datelined today, so I mean, accelerating impeachment probe of Trump. Well, you know, I hope that it's still accelerating. Let's say that. House Democrats unveiled on Tuesday 2 articles of impeachment against the president, saying he abused okay, you know all about that. OMB has been ensnared by the controversy for months. 2 career OMB officials resigned in part over concerns about the agency's hold on Ukrainian assistance. According to the Ukrainian assistance. There we actually need the article. Okay. According to the testimony of Mark Sandy, a career OMB official, this was. Current and former OMB employees have described the hold as highly unusual. OMB has denied that the resignations came over the aid. Government officials have testified that they were alarmed that the aid to Ukraine was withheld, as OMB staffers pushed to get the aid out as soon as possible, according to Sandy. Some have told Congress they worried Trump was trying to use government funds for personal political gain. He was. That's why he's being impeached. Trump agreed to release the aid under pressure to do so from Vice President Pence and Senator Rob Portman of Ohio in a phone call on September 11th, because why would they be busy on September 11th? In the memo, Paoletta says that the agency frequently puts temporary holds on money already signed into law. I mean, it does happen, right? And that Congress also stops money that has already been approved from reaching federal agencies. Less so, but of course, I guess what they're leaving out here is, again, what it requires to do that and to do it legally is notice and explanation to Congress. In a footnote to the memo, OMB calls on the nonpartisan GAO to look into what it says are Congress's own moves to hold up money already signed into law. Wow. That's really something. But that's Trump through and through, really. I mean, the idea that they were caught doing this and they were asked to justify what they were doing, and their answer is, well, other people do it too. I mean, answer the goddamn question. Just once. Paoletta asserts that while OMB must notify Congress, before delaying allocation of some funds, the Ukraine assistance amounts to a programmatic delay that does not require notification, citing a prior GAO opinion. I'd love to see that. I mean, it's possible that it exists. Paoletta authorized the repeated delays in the spending while awaiting a decision from Trump on the matter, according to the administration official. For decades, OMB has routinely used its apportionment authority to prevent funds from being used, Paoletta wrote. Often, in managing appropriations, OMB must briefly pause an agency's legal ability to spend those funds for a number of reasons, including to ensure that the funds are being spent efficiently, that they are being spent in accordance with statutory directives, or to assess how or whether the funds should be used for a particular activity. I think one of the complicating factors here is that the money was supposed to be sent to a foreign government, and there is no sense in which it would be legitimately possible for the OMB to study whether the government of Ukraine was efficiently spending the money. I just don't think that's the sort. I think they may have a case perhaps to make, and I'd have to read, we'd have to discuss the nuances of it, but they might have a case with domestic spending. I just don't think that this kind of aid falls under their purview, and I think that they're stretching the bounds of the whatever GAO opinion they think they're relying on here. That's my guess, and I'm almost certain it would bear out with examination. It's just anyway. So often in managing appropriations, OMB sometimes briefly pauses things in order to see that the money is being used properly, which is not something that they would be able to tell from their perspective here. OMB has previously given partial explanations of its conduct over aid related to Ukraine, but the memo represents its most fully articulated defense to date of the legality of the hold it placed on the assistance. It doesn't work, but this is their longest paper so far. Importantly, the agency's memo does not attempt to rebut Democrats' contention that Trump abused his power by seeking to pressure a foreign nation to open an investigation into a political rival, or that he obstructed justice in deterring the investigation into his conduct. Can't do that, and they don't even try. Several OMB divisions wrote a joint memo in August recommending the military aid go to Ukraine as soon as possible, according to Sandy's testimony, noting the assistance, quote, is consistent with the national security strategy in terms of supporting a stable, peaceful Europe. Pauletta's new memo states that the Ukrainian assistance was put on hold in response to an administration directive. I'd like to see it. Is it written? No, there's no paperwork. Pending a policy decision, it says, with internal discussions on the aid beginning on June 19th. There's more to the article. We have our next break coming up. Fit in another paragraph before jumping out of here. That was the same day, June 19th, I believe, that the president read that article in the Washington Examiner about the Pentagon's plan to spend $250 million in weapons, or to send $250 million in weapons to Ukraine. According to the administration official who spoke on condition of anonymity, the president's questions set off that scramble to answer his questions about the aid, this person says. Very interesting that he only learned about it at the last moment, and this is the first time he's ever questioned a weapons sale. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the Washington Post article about the new OMB memo defending their freezing of the Ukraine aid. Let's see. There's a very weird and confusing part here that seems a little odd. The memo says that at no point during the pause did Defense Department attorneys tell OMB the Ukrainian funding would be prevented from being spent before the end of the year. I am not really 100% what that means. At no point during the pause did Defense Department attorneys tell OMB that Ukrainian funding would be prevented from being spent before the end of the year. I don't know whether that's supposed to mean at no point did the Defense Department let the OMB know that by pausing this, I'm not certain exactly what they're trying to say here, but OMB's memo also stresses that the Defense Department indicated to its staff that it didn't intend to release most of the security funds to Ukraine until September, so the damage of withholding the funds was minuscule. I guess that's the claim, but of course that's in contradiction to the earlier claims that the work that needed to be done in order to make sure that the aid went out the door before the end of September, the end of the fiscal year, and therefore was still validly appropriated money when it went out the door, couldn't proceed so long as there was this hold on it. And although it's now the argument of the White House and the OMB that the hold was temporary, I don't think that there was any indication to the appropriate departments, and certainly none to Congress, that it was temporary, or indeed what the hold was about. So a lot of work had to be done in the responsible departments before the money was released. Even if they're right, even if OMB's memo is correct, and that money wasn't slated to go out the door until the end of September, or at least the Defense Department money wasn't. The work involved in getting all the paperwork in order and all the machinery moving so that the money could be. I mean, if you're not releasing the money until the last minute, and there's a real danger of losing the money's availability if you extend things into October, then you're really under a lot of pressure to make sure that all the work is moving appropriately, being handled smoothly, etc., because there's not a lot of margin for error in September. And apparently all of these departments were frozen in place because they were told only that there was a hold on the funds, and occasionally they were told that the hold originated in OMB, but OMB would answer no questions about it. So there was, I'm sure, a lot of panic and a lot of inability to do the work that was necessary to get those funds released in September, even though they eventually had the temporary hold that lasted from June until mid-September, lifted on September 11th. All the work that needed to be done to get that stuff out the door couldn't be done, and then lo and behold, but I guess to no one's surprise, the work couldn't get out the door, or the work couldn't be done and the money didn't get out the door, and they had to come up with a congressional fix for most of it. And by the way, I don't know that there's any paperwork anywhere that indicates that the money ever really did get to Ukraine, even though they did come up with a congressional fix to keep the money available for an additional year. I don't know where the receipts are that would indicate that Ukraine actually got that money. They may still be facing the exact same pressure that got Trump impeached in the first place, and we wouldn't know. And they won't tell us, because they may still yet be under Trump's thumb and thinking that they might get this money eventually, but only if they cooperate in interfering in our impeachment process, on top of having interfered or agreed to or been approached to interfere in our 2020 election. Anyway, OMB's memo also stresses that the Defense Department indicated, this was about they weren't going to put the money out until September. Some experts have questioned OMB's arguments, and some lay people too, that it was following the president's direction, given the evidence that Trump had political motivations for withholding the money. It's probably true that it's within the power of the executive branch and OMB to put constraints on funds to make sure they are going out appropriately. We have seen in the past that money has been held out or put aside, said Mark Mazur, a former Treasury Department Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy in the Obama administration. But it's a little weird to have an "I'm only following orders" defense here. That's true. That is weird. And of course, again, unstated for whatever reason it's true, it's within the power of the executive branch, but there are limitations on it, minimal limitations. All you have to do is tell the people whose job it supposedly is to control the purse strings that you have questions about how the purse strings are being controlled, and you've set this money aside, and you can only do it temporarily, in order to find out that everything is on the up and up. And then you have to start actually doing some work to find out whether or not your questions can be answered. And I have yet to see the receipts on those questions being asked, because they weren't asked, because this isn't the real reason that the money was being withheld. They're just throwing that out there as a possibility, so that we are frozen in place, and the people who hem and haw about the minutia of these things will say, well, we can examine this. But it's pretty easy to settle in only a few minutes. We've just done it. OMB officials also compiled a 10-page list of government records that they say show Congress held up various programs that had already been signed into law. That may or may not actually be true. I haven't seen the 10-page list. But also, again, Congress appropriates money, and if they decide that the money needs to be held up pending further investigation, at the very least, it has the advantage of working this way. Who spent this money? We did, says Congress. And who's holding up this money's spending? We are, said Congress. Well, wait a minute. I thought you made up your mind about these things. Well, we changed our minds. Aha! So you are changing your minds. Yes, but this is our job. We appropriate money. That's different from saying we appropriate money and someone else has changed their mind. You don't get to change your mind about this stuff. It's not up to you, not alone anyway. And if you do exercise what authority you do have to ask questions at this late date, you need to ask those questions, and you need to let us know that you're asking them so that we can help answer them. The point here, again, is that the money has been appropriated by a specific process, by a specific body, and many, many hands go into making that decision. And it is not and could never have been the intention of the founders or the Supreme Court justices that have interpreted things in the interim that the decision of such a large body like Congress, a consensus building, well, that's what it's supposed to be, body like Congress, could be overturned in secret with no notice and no particular reason given by one person's direction. It's just not possible. And in order for that to be the case and for it to have been to pass constitutional muster, that's basically the bottom line. Last paragraph here. The examples on the 10-page list include Ukraine funding allocated through the Assistance for Europe, Eurasia, and Central Asia program, which OMB's documents say was held up in 2017, as well as tens of millions of dollars for programs in countries such as Libya, the Philippines, Mexico, and Sri Lanka. That doesn't tell us too much, but I assume that if we had the list in front of us and picking over it with the history of those allocations in front of us, we might find that there were very different circumstances involved in those holds. All right. Let's see. Oh, yes, Mike Musson, of course, pointing out that is so unlike the president to issue a sweeping policy change moments after hearing about something for the first time. Yes, exactly right. And quite so. Very familiar problem. All right. Let's see. Meanwhile, over in Ukraine, I guess this would be a natural progression here. As I said, we can't be sure where the heads of Ukrainian leadership are in all of this. And I don't mean who is the head of the Ukrainian government. I mean, what's their head space like? What's going on in their minds? I don't know where they feel they're best served or how they feel they're best served in all of this. Betsy Swan's article for the Daily Beast calls this all into question. Ukrainians, you understand how this is being set up? Ukrainians say, Trump just sent us a terrible signal. And he did. Subheader here, Kyiv officials were hoping for a statement of support from Trump in advance of Ukraine's big summit with Russia. Instead, the president hosted Putin's main man. Adjusting the headphones here for this very important story. Ukrainian officials spent last weekend glued to Trump's Twitter feed. Don't we all? People working closely with Ukrainian President Zelensky have been in contact with Trump administration officials over the past several weeks discussing the relationship between the two presidents, according to 4 people with knowledge of the talks. Based on those conversations, Ukrainian officials came to expect that President Donald Trump would make a statement of support before Zelensky met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in France for peace talks. A statement might even come via Twitter, they say they were told. Through all the signals we got, we firmly believed there would be a statement, a senior Zelensky administration official told the Daily Beast. Why would they be expecting that? Well, if you followed the testimony of the State Department officials before the House Intelligence Committee, they all outlined that it was part of American national security policy to support Ukraine in its fight, its struggle for independence, and to maintain its territorial integrity and its own political integrity against Russian incursion, and that it was important that the United States offer visible shows of support for Ukraine. That's what the White House meeting that Zelensky wanted so badly was all about. And it wasn't just Zelensky. Before him, it was Poroshenko. And I guess, well, since 2014, certainly, the Ukrainian governments have been very interested in public displays of American support for their position. And it's difficult for Ukraine to deal with Russia without an indication of American support for Ukraine. They're sort of stuck out there on their own. And just recalling what we read the other day, though there was some pushback on it, the comment on Twitter from Rachel Bidikofer, who was pointing out that in 1994, immediately after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the emergence of an independent Ukraine, Ukraine found itself in possession of a significant portion of the previously Soviet nuclear arsenal, and they agreed to forego any interest in retaining the weapons and establishing themselves as a nuclear state in exchange for guarantees that the United States and the West would protect them from Russian aggression. We either could protect ourselves from Russian aggression by holding onto a nuclear arsenal, but that creates the possibility of some real instability in a world where a brand new government in a very uncertain circumstance, and we're armed with nuclear weapons, and it's not 100% sure which direction we're going to go here, pro-West or look to the East with Moscow. So they agreed, though, to disarm and dismantle the nuclear weapons and or turn them over to the authority of Moscow, I guess, and return them to Russian territory in exchange for our protection. And that just highlights how despicable it was for Trump to have sold them out. You know, they did the world a huge favor here, and America walked away from it. And so, you know, here they are, though, depending on us for a show of support on their way into peace talks with Putin. But of course, Trump couldn't, he couldn't stand the idea of not taking Putin's side in all this. So that's what he did. So there they are. The poor Ukrainians are going in. All indications were, though, that the serious people, the adults in the room, were going to be able to persuade Trump to at least put out some sort of pro forma statement, a good luck Ukraine or something like that. But as Saturday and Sunday ticked by, there was only silence from the White House. Even as Ukrainian officials have publicly been loath to criticize Trump's pressure campaign on our country, right? And that's been huge for the Trump forces throughout this impeachment ordeal. Well, besides read the transcript, the other thing that he yells most often is, even Zelensky says there was no pressure. The Ukrainians say there was no pressure, right? The Ukrainians all along have felt, pressure. But the pressure was to say that there was no pressure so that the Trump administration would deliver, finally, that aid that they had been withholding for political reasons. They are walking on eggshells over there in Ukraine and doing everything they can to stay out of American politics, even though at some point they really probably could justifiably conclude, look, we're not going to get the help we need from Trump. As long as he's there, the United States isn't going to come to our assistance. He's Putin's puppet, and we ought to just realize it. And maybe we should, although it would be regarded as interfering in American politics, maybe we should just tell the truth about what's going on, let the chips fall where they may, see if he gets impeached, see if he's removed from office. We're not getting anywhere so long as he's in office. The best play for Ukraine is to see Trump removed from office. We should just spill the beans. They could justify that position at this point. So, as we were saying, the whole weekend went by and they had nothing to say about that. They never got their show of support, even a tweet from Trump. Even as Ukrainian officials have been loath to criticize Trump's pressure campaign on their country, frustrations with Washington have quietly percolated, and you can understand why. And last weekend, they were especially acute. On Monday, Zelensky and Putin met in Normandy, France, for face-to-face negotiations on the war in eastern Ukraine. Russia had seized Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014, and ever since, backed separatists in the eastern part of the country. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel were on hand for the talks. President Trump nowhere nearby. No one cared, right? Putin and Zelensky agreed to exchange all known prisoners, according to the Washington Post. Another round of talks is expected in several months. Words of support from the United States in the lead up to the Normandy talks could have given the Ukrainian president more leverage with Putin, according to the Zelensky administration official and two additional people close to his administration. I'd question that, by the way. I think, in all likelihood, what you would have gotten is a pro forma statement and a wink, and Putin probably would have told you in Normandy, yeah, I'm sure Trump really totally meant it and won't be doing exactly what I tell him to do. This was all a PR thing, and I don't know how well that would have helped Zelensky. Anyway, instead, though, Trump spent the past weekend on Twitter, tweeting about Fox News pundits, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and CNN. It was a particularly busy weekend of social media for him, with more than 100 tweets and retweets by Politico's count, but no word on Normandy. And the next week put salt in the wound. On Tuesday, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, held a joint press conference with the United States Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and made an appearance at the White House. So, special treatment, special friend status for Russia, and not even so much as a tweet for Ukraine. At this point, there can be no doubt that he's actively working against United States foreign policy and national security policy in doing this. It's more evidence for his impeachment. One of the people close to the Zelensky administration said the silence from the White House, combined with Lavrov's photo-friendly visit to Washington, sent a terrible signal and was most unfortunate. According to a readout of Trump's meeting with Lavrov, the president urged Russia to resolve the conflict with Ukraine. The Ukrainian official called the episode frustrating. Ukrainians say they view the coupling of Trump's pre-Normandy silence and the administration's decision to welcome Lavrov as a signal in and of itself, and not a good one. Zelensky administration officials are now reconsidering their strategy on communications with and about the Trump administration, the officials said. Thus far, Zelensky administration officials have stayed in line with the Trump administration's narrative on the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani's Ukraine activity, and the focuses of the impeachment inquiry. But they say they have little to show for it and may take a different public relations strategy in the future. Well, now you have this weekend to make up your mind, guys. The impeachment trial's starting soon. A Time interview published earlier this week captured Kyiv's willingness to publicly bolster Trump's version of events. You see? This is kind of what I was speaking of here. Is up to this point, the Ukrainians have been holding out hope that they could get the money if they were pro-Trump in all this, believe it or not, even though he's the guy selling them out. Again, a Time interview published earlier this week captured Kyiv's willingness to publicly bolster Trump's version of events. Andrei Yermak, a top aide to Zelensky, you remember him, contradicted a key assertion that European Union Ambassador Gordon Sondland made in his congressional testimony last month. Sondland said that he pulled Yermak aside during an event in Warsaw and urged him to have Kyiv announce Trump-friendly investigations. Yermak, meanwhile, told Time that no such conversation happened. The statement was a body blow to a key impeachment witness's testimony, though Sondland's lawyer said he stood by his description of events. In a separate interview, Zelensky said he did not speak to Trump in terms of, you give me this, I give you that. Trump tweeted out a link to the interview and thanked Zelensky for the comment. Trump's relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was a key focus of the impeachment inquiry, obviously. The inquiry began, well, you know all about that. Do I need to fill that in? No. But again, maybe just one more note about Sondland before we wrap things up. Trump has vehemently denied allegations that withholding the military aid, which happened for a short time, 6 months, at his orders, or I guess not 6 months, June, right, to July, August, September, so 3 months. Sondland, meanwhile, told Congress that the administration was explicit that it refused to arrange a White House meeting between Trump and Zelensky until Kyiv announced the two investigations. After weeks of closed-door depositions and hearings, Pelosi announced the introduction of 2 articles of impeachment. House Dems are expected to, the whole House is expected to vote on those articles as soon as next week. I don't know why they lay it on House Democrats. You know what happens after that. If they pass, then it's sent on to the Senate for trial. So that's the way this one winds up. And I don't know. I think that's an important, another piece of background information. It's possible that the dam breaks and the Ukrainians give up on trying to give Trump what he wants in exchange for what they want. They're still working the quid pro quo that Trump insists isn't in place. But at some point, they may give up on it, and I don't know whether that's going to make any difference in the impeachment inquiry or in the trial, but I guess they don't need to make up their mind over the weekend. The impeachment's going to be adopted. They need to make their mind up, I guess, before the trial begins, likely in January. And although what sort of impact it will have is open to question as well, because I guess maybe we'll start on this one before heading into the break. Washington Post likewise reporting here in this instance. Seung-Min Kim, Paul Kane, and Rachel Bade on the other big headline of the day. Senate Republicans look to hold short impeachment trial despite Trump's desire for an aggressive defense. It is, of course, interesting that they are at odds on this, but I think the Senate feeling will prevail in this just because they're the ones that get to set the rules. Senate Republicans are coalescing around a strategy of holding a short impeachment trial early next year that would include no witnesses, a plan that would clash with President Trump's desire to stage a public defense of his actions toward Ukraine that would include testimony the White House believes would damage its political rivals, which is also an interesting note. Right there in the top paragraph, they're still playing the same game, right? Joshua and the Whopper, the game is still going here. It's still playing. They're still trying to play the let's damage political rivals through official actions game, which is amazing because that was supposed to be their defense in the impeachment trial. I mean, if you're listening to the show, you're not likely to need any more convincing here. And it would be a somewhat complex point. People don't all, if they're tuned out of this stuff, they're not going to get it. But I mean, he's being accused of playing with using his official role and using official instruments of government to try to damage his political rivals in advance of the 2020 elections. That's the accusation. His defense was going to be, oh yeah, watch me continue to use official channels to damage my political rivals. And Republicans were, I guess, slated to look at that and say, you're right, you've done nothing wrong, even though you've just committed the same crime again right in front of us. But no witnesses are being brought in to tell us about that. I know, you just witnessed another crime right in front of you. Maybe the House managers will point that out. I don't know. But another big topic of conversation this morning, the fact that they're going to go with a no witnesses structure. This is discussed throughout this piece, and we'll discuss the strategic value of what they're trying to do, I guess, after the break. But I think I feel compelled to point out at this juncture that once again, I feel tremendously let down by Democratic strategy in all of this. We've dropped the lawsuit, one of the several lawsuits, and looking to, we dropped the Bolton suit, right? Because we had the Don McGahn suit going, and it's being appealed, but then it was like, okay, they're appealing it, but don't worry, because pretty soon we're going to impeach the president. And I guess just to fill in the background here, we sued and it looked like we were winning, and in fact did win in the district court, and Don McGahn had to testify, right? That was the order. But then they appealed it. There was a stay temporarily, but then the stay was lifted because they said, no, the testimony being ordered is pursuant to a lawful subpoena. But nonetheless, the White House said, we're going to appeal it to the appeals court, and I think they did appeal it to the appeals court, and the appeals court says no, and now they said they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court on top of all of that, and it's just more of the same waiting game where the Congress has to sit there and wait to find out either whether the courts are going to tell everybody that it was a lawful subpoena and enforce their ability, or go the other way, forever changing the balance of power between the presidency and the Congress. But they said don't worry about it, because maybe the strategy is to call Don McGahn as a witness at the impeachment trial, and the Supreme Court Chief Justice will be there to rule on the propriety of that. Well, I guess we're not getting that either. Weird. Who could have foreseen that happening? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I'm checking the record here, trying to figure things out. As of late November, we were just in the position, I guess, at that point of McGahn appealing the finding of the district court to the circuit court, the D.C. Circuit Court. So maybe the D.C. Circuit Court hasn't spoken yet. Though I don't know. I sort of felt like perhaps they had turned something around quickly. The district judge did lift the stay. So there was that. But that got us through Thanksgiving. And I guess we haven't had any activity since then. But anyway, I recall reading at some point, or perhaps discussing with Greg, and I'll have to see if we can come up with the article. And I don't know. I thought I might have had it in pocket as well, but it's difficult to find in the archives. But there was, I thought, a point at which an argument was advanced that maybe it was okay, and that dropping the idea of pursuing the subpoenas in court, although the McGahn case continues, but the Bolton one was dropped. Was it? Maybe if I search on Bolton rather than McGahn, we'll come up with the article. But the idea was floated that, the House managers will almost certainly call for his, not Bolton's, but McGahn's testimony at the impeachment trial, and it might be of interest then to have the Chief Justice be the one to rule on whether or not the president could invoke some sort of privilege at that point to prevent McGahn from testifying. But what was forgotten in that analysis, and I guess we probably forgot about it right then and there too, at least at that point, and this is kind of how they come up with these victories, is at the time that Democrats begin strategizing over how will we deal with their intransigence, they just don't anticipate or contemplate how extensive Republican intransigence really is likely to be. So here we were thinking, okay, well, what if McGahn loses in court? What if he loses in every court he gets to face before the trial begins in the Senate? And as things stand the day the trial begins, there is a court order, a federal court order, insisting that the subpoena is valid and McGahn must testify. Well, for one thing, I don't know what the wording of the order is, and it may be, what if the wording of the order is that McGahn is hereby ordered to testify before the whatever committee subpoenaed him, intelligence, I don't know who issued the subpoena. And here we are calling him as a witness in the impeachment trial, and someone might then at that point object and say there's no court order compelling McGahn to testify in an impeachment trial. He was compelled to testify before a hearing of the XYZ committee, whichever committee it was. And, they might push back and say, well, the point is that the subpoena, a congressional subpoena is valid as against McGahn, and he has to testify whoever issues the subpoena. And for instance, so we are, as House managers, can House managers subpoena witnesses? That's a good question. I don't really know how they compel the testimony. I guess ordinarily they'd be calling their own witnesses who would be willing to testify, and I don't know whether they can compel hostile witnesses to testify at the impeachment trial or not. I'm not certain what the procedure is there. But what I am certain of is that at the time that people were contemplating whether or not maybe the Democrats thought it was okay to drop pursuing the subpoenas in court because they would be able to get directly in front of the Supreme Court Chief Justice without his colleagues. And the thinking was, well, Chief Justice Roberts historically has shown us that he's concerned with his legacy and with maintaining the legitimacy of the Supreme Court as an institution. And it would be very difficult for him to be to feel comfortable being so nakedly partisan while presiding over an impeachment trial in the Senate on television and rule in favor of, for instance, a anticipated plea from the Trump defense that McGahn and others be prevented from testifying under some sort of executive privilege or absolute immunity or whatever stupid label they chose to slap on it this time. And that, they might get a favorable ruling there. Of course, they could get an unfavorable ruling, and that would be awful. But somebody thought maybe you should be willing to roll the dice because Roberts isn't going to be so nakedly partisan in this situation. What they forgot was, what if you never get to the point where you're able to call McGahn as a witness? What if the ground rules are set ahead of time that there will be no witnesses, and so therefore there will be no opportunity for Chief Justice Roberts to protect his legacy and the legitimacy of the Supreme Court as an institution by overruling Republican objections to the testimony of Don McGahn? What if the question of Don McGahn's testimony is settled ahead of time before he ever gets there? Oh, yeah. So I'm a little disappointed that they didn't think of it, but I don't think I thought of it either, so I can't, be terribly frustrated with it. But then, I guess this is just another one of those lessons. Like, if you thought that, well, these people who do this stuff for a living must have thought this through even more so than I have, well, no, I guess they really don't. Oh, well, too bad about that. But, it's difficult to anticipate everything. But I feel like that one we should have guessed on. And I guess if we had walked through it step by step at the time on the air, I feel like we would have stumbled upon that problem. On the other hand, I don't know that it was Democratic strategy to do this. This was just being floated by a pundit somewhere along the line, right? A legal expert or pundit who was saying, well, maybe this is something that they could be thinking. Maybe they weren't thinking that at all. And I don't know whether they were thinking nothing or they were thinking about that and said, yeah, we'll be defeated in that one because there's 51 votes in the Senate. So forget it. We'll just proceed and see what happens. I don't know. All right. Back to the Post's article about the Senate Republicans' plans for how to conduct the trial. Several GOP senators on Wednesday said it would be better to limit the trial and quickly vote to acquit Trump rather than engage in what could be a political circus. I would say I don't think the appetite is real high for turning this into a prolonged spectacle, Senate Majority Whip John Thune. the chamber's second-ranking Republican, told the Washington Post on Wednesday, when asked whether Trump will get the witnesses he wants in an impeachment trial. Members want to deal with the arguments, hear the case, and hopefully reach a conclusion. So, not to be lost in all of this is Donald Trump thinks he's going to put on a pro-Trump rally extravaganza as a defense, and that will convince the Republican senators. And I don't know. I don't know whether they're going to convince him. I don't know whether it matters whether they convince him. But they probably could sit him down and say, look, you know that the Republicans aren't going to vote to convict you. What do you care? Don't put on a big show. Just take the acquittal and walk. But that's not Trump's style, and he wants to be seen as having put up a fight, and he wants to use this opportunity. You know how he does things. He would get up there. I mean, he keeps threatening that he wants to testify, and he may even actually want to testify, but he's hoping at least that his surrogates will get up there and they'll be asked, what did you know and when did you know it? Or what did the president know and when did he know it? They'd be asked questions about the facts and the substance of the case. And it would be Trump's hope that they would answer, oh, yeah, what about Benghazi? What about Chappaquiddick? And that's what he actually, I think, wants to mount as a defense. Or more likely, more directly, he would also be saying, of course, what about the Bidens? And the hope that he really and truly had was that his witnesses, and maybe even he, would have an opportunity to speak on the Senate floor in a nationally televised trial and be able to make all sorts of allegations about the Bidens and maybe some other people too. Who knows? But the senators aren't really up for it for the most part. The emerging Senate GOP plan would provide sufficient time, possibly 2 weeks, maybe more, maybe less, we'll see. They actually say 2 weeks without laughing, for both the House impeachment managers and Trump's attorneys to make their arguments before a vote on the president's fate, according to 13 senators and aides familiar with the discussions, who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity. Most notably, a quick, clean trial is broadly perceived to be the preference of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who wants to minimize political distractions in an election year, during which Republicans will be working to protect their slim majority in the chamber. Tension now is over whether to allow witnesses who could turn the trial into a more contentious affair. Trump's desired witness list includes, ready, it's dumb, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden, not Duncan Hunter, the convict in the House, as well as the anonymous whistleblower whose complaint about the president's conversation, led to the whole impeachment inquiry. Senior Republicans say they see no need for controversial witnesses if their testimony won't ultimately change the expected outcome. At a Senate GOP luncheon this week, McConnell warned his colleagues against calling witnesses. Mutually assured destruction, he said, according to a Republican in the room. McConnell's not sure Republicans have enough votes to only call Trump's preferred list, the person said. You see what's happening? Any agreement to call witnesses would require 51 votes, and if Democratic votes were needed to end an impasse among Republicans, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer would demand his own list of witnesses as part of any compromise. So they are contemplating having witnesses, but only if, and he would be willing, if he had his 51 votes locked up, they would hold a trial that has only Trump's witnesses and no one else's. I think we are underestimating McConnell's willingness to hold a kangaroo court trial, to put more than a thumb on the scale, to lock in an outcome. But I do think that he also thinks they'd be better off if they simply had the two sides present the issues. I think, and that he might be afraid that he wouldn't have the votes to somehow engineer things such that the House managers got 2 seconds to present their case, and Trump's defense attorneys got 2 weeks. I guess if he thought he had the votes for it, he might go ahead and do it. Anyway, under McConnell's thinking, this could possibly mean calling Vice President Pence and top White House aides, such as Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, to testify. We missed our chance to call him. Acting! Right, Chief of Staff. Okay, let's see. McConnell has not publicly stated specifically how he wants the Senate trial to be conducted. Earlier this week, he laid out two potential scenarios. Once both sides make their case, the Senate would call the witnesses, and which he said would be like basically having another trial. Or, McConnell said, a majority of senators might decide they've heard enough and believe they know what would happen, subsequently moving to a final vote. His members are getting the hint. I think he's indicated that he would like to get this over with and get to quite a few other matters that we can get done. Only one matter, the judges. Senator Pat Roberts said, in other words, get back to business. Even GOP lawmakers initially eager to summon high-profile witnesses have begun to back away from that approach. Last week, Ron Johnson was pushing for Hunter Biden to testify, probably the dumbest of the choices they possibly could make. But on Wednesday, he conceded that a trial with no witnesses that would run approximately 2 weeks in January was kind of growing as the consensus. Despite the emerging view among Senate Republicans, the wild card remains Trump. The president and his allies have said they're eager for a vigorous defense of Trump to counter the narrative Democrats have laid out in recent weeks as part of an inquiry that has resulted in the articles of impeachment. He wants to have his opportunity for the first time to present his defense, said Senator David Perdue. Of course, he's been tweeting his defense and saying it aloud everywhere he goes for months now. White House aides met with GOP senators last week to make the case for a more robust trial that would include live witnesses on the floor rather than the videotaped depositions that were entered into evidence, say, during the President Bill Clinton impeachment trial in 1999. In this instance, we believe very strongly, given the fatally flawed process in the House, that if they were to elect against our better advice and send over impeachment to the Senate, that we need witnesses as part of our trial and a full defense of the president on the facts. Eric Ueland, the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, told reporters following the lunch meeting with Republicans. Republicans privately hope that once the president sees that calling controversial witnesses will do nothing to change the outcome, he'll relent on his initial demands. It's a roll of the dice. Meanwhile, House Democratic leaders are bracing for the possibility of losing a handful of moderate Democrats on impeachment next week. We've heard about that from Greg. Lawmakers and senior staff are privately predicting they'll lose more than the 2 Democrats who opposed impeachment inquiry rules package in late September. 2 senior Democratic aides said the total could be as many as half a dozen. A third said it could be even higher. Several moderates are concerned, well, do we need their rationale? I think we all know what it is. Let's see. Anything else we want to glean from this one? Senate leaders say, Democratic leaders in the House say they don't intend to whip the vote. So that's an interesting decision as well. The rest of this stuff, I think, is largely background that I think we can skip. So we're done here. That's where the Senate stands. And let's see. Not that much time left here, but let me go and grab what else. Let's see. I'll make you aware of the fact, I don't know how much we get out of this, that Eric Holder has written an op-ed in the Washington Post saying William Barr is unfit to be Attorney General. I haven't read the article. I will not at this point read the article, but I can guess that I generally agree. And I want to add my voice to the chorus calling for his impeachment. There's another such article in the Daily Beast. Let's just open it up so we can give you the headline here. Don't stop with Donald Trump, Democrats. Impeach Attorney General Bill Barr. There are plenty of grounds for it. They absolutely should do it. I don't know if they have the appetite for it, but they should continue with their work and be thinking about that because he's doing at least as much damage as Trump himself to our constitutional order. Let's see. I will make you aware, likewise, of pushback on that executive order. There's a Slate piece here from Mark Joseph Stern. No, the Trump administration is not redefining Judaism as a nationality. Its executive order on anti-Semitism won't change much at all. And I skimmed that one. It's alleged that the language by which the Trump administration had hoped to make these changes is actually rather vague but limited in a way, and that this is perhaps overreaction, but I would say it's worth proceeding with caution when it comes to Donald Trump because he's got Nazis working for him in the White House. And you know how Nazis feel about redefining Jewish nationality. It's kind of a problem. All right, let's see. Other things that I think we ought to perhaps take note of. What have I got here? Yes, the reaction that Igor Bobich was able to elicit from Dick Durbin on the possibility of the Senate holding an impeachment trial without witnesses. Durbin's comment here, in the parlance of trial lawyers, that's a summary judgment proceeding. That's not a trial. Interesting. And I think that the Democrats could get some resonance with the wider public with the argument that it's not a trial unless there are witnesses. I mean, I guess technically speaking, I see what he's getting at here. It's a term of art, summary judgment proceeding, but it's not the case necessarily that all trials have witnesses. But everyone who's familiar with trials through television drama, and that's most of us, probably has learned to expect witnesses. You might get away with, or you might really find resonance among the public for the idea that this is a sham if the Republicans were to try to adopt rules that prohibited witnesses. I don't think that's in keeping with what most people think of as a trial. That's true. All right. Let's see. Other items of interest out there. Greg mentioned the $1 million payment that somehow landed in Lev Parnas's accounts from Russia in the middle of all this, and I thought that was rather interesting all by itself. You've likely heard about it, and I think we'll probably reserve for tomorrow any further reading on it. Let's just throw this one in here because we just have a few minutes left. Daily Beast article again, perhaps introducing a new name in Ukrainian American circles out there around Trump. This piece here by Betsy Swan, also co-authored by Aswin Subsang. Pro-Trump network OAN, you remember them, the fake television network that appears on YouTube, like our fake radio station appears on YouTube, tried to get this Ukrainian millionaire a visa before his arrest. Another Ukrainian millionaire arrested. The Trumpiest of TV channels, OAN, tried to bring a peddler of Biden dirt to America. The Ukrainian went to jail instead. Oh, that's terrible. Anyway, let's take a look at this one and get that name on the record. Before catching the eye of German law enforcement, former Ukrainian parliamentarian, and I think they mean here not the parliamentarian of, but rather a member of their parliament, another Alexander, Onyshenko, drew attention from the conservative TV channel One America News. Last week, German authorities arrested the multimillionaire because of a warrant from Ukrainian anti-corruption prosecutors. And we love them, right? Are we now pro-anti-corruption prosecutors or against? Before his arrest, though, the Trump-friendly media outlet tried to help him get a visa to travel to the U.S. In other words, I guess, you could portray that as OAN tried to help a Ukrainian fugitive from justice escape arrest in Germany and come to the United States. The Ukrainians might not be sending their best here. The effort, which has not previously been reported, was part of a push by OAN to unearth information on Burisma Holdings, the energy company that retained Hunter Biden. You know all about that. Onyshenko has claimed to have dirt on the firm. Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, meanwhile, has boosted the channel's Burisma work. He brought them with him on his recent tour of Ukraine, looking for to take fake depositions, right? I can confirm that One America Network News did attempt to secure a number of visas for former Ukrainian officials to travel to the United States, including Alexander Onyshenko. Network President Charles Herring told the Daily Beast in an email. One America News Network made the request prior to Mr. Onyshenko being detained. One America News investigative efforts have cost in excess of $100,000 to date. I don't know why anybody cares about that. It's actually evidence against them. Herring added, who's paying for instance. Herring added that the outlet is also currently seeking visas for several other former Ukrainian officials, but is no longer doing so for Onyshenko. Herring declined to say which other ex-officials his outlet is trying to secure visas for. Efforts by media outlets to secure legal travel authorizations for their sources are an ethical gray area, according to one expert. Especially when the source in question is accused of embezzlement. That is a little bit odd, isn't it? So I don't know whether that issue was solved by their going to Ukraine or what. I don't really know why they would have needed to try to secure a visa for them to come to the United States. They can certainly converse with them without them leaving Ukraine. It's weird that they were interested in getting shady characters entry into the United States. And don't forget that that was also a large part of the testimony provided by former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, before the Intelligence Committee, and some other people commenting on it too, that there were multiple efforts to get banned and sanctioned individuals visas to visit the United States for unknown reasons. They were, very often were stating that they were visiting their kids or coming as tourists, but they were in fact coming to meet with Rudy Kaludi, and Rudy Kaludi had to fly there instead. So visas are a flashpoint in the impeachment investigation already. Onyshenko's lawyer did not respond to requests for comment. Ukrainian anti-corruption prosecutors allege Onyshenko ran a scheme to steal millions from Kyiv's state-owned, you'll never believe it, natural gas company. Can you believe it? It's just so crazy. The news of OAN's effort to help him get a visa comes on the heels of Rudy Kaludi's trip to Kyiv, where Trump's personal lawyer worked with a correspondent and crew member of OAN. On that trip, Giuliani and OAN's Chanel Rayon met with Viktor Shokin and Yuri Lutsenko, two former Ukrainian prosecutors who have alleged misconduct by the Bidens. Their claims that Obama administration officials pressured the Ukrainian government to ignore wrongdoing by Burisma in a bid to protect the Bidens are at the heart of Giuliani's search for dirt. Giuliani has said he's working with OAN on this project, and the network's segments back that up. So Rudy Kaludi has been trying to buy visas for Ukrainian embezzlers. OAN's coverage of the impeachment scandal has raised eyebrows. The channel sent a camera crew to the apartment building where they believe the whistleblower who kicked off the Ukraine scandal lives. Oh, did you know that? And to the homes of suspected whistleblowers' parents. That's nice of them. And Rion's documentary series on the Bidens and Burisma has taken an odd tone. Probably so much that they should have put documentary series in quote. In a promotional segment for one program, she said the sources would, quote, testify under oath for the show. That, of course, can't actually happen. Giuliani figures prominently throughout the programming, and on Tuesday evening, Rion tweeted effusive praise of Giuliani's communications director. Remember her? Christiane. I found out about the pronunciation of that. Christiane Allen. An incredibly talented patriot and breath of fresh air here in the swamp. Here's to the adventures ahead, Rion wrote, along with a picture of herself and Allen. Yes, remember Christiane? I have another article on Christiane. Perhaps we'll talk about that on Friday. She accompanied Rudy Kaludi to Ukraine, of course, on his latest trip. Onyshenko told conservative media site CD Media that he applied for a U.S. visa earlier this year. It wasn't his first overture to American officials. In 2016, Onyshenko met with Justice Department officials to discuss corruption in Ukraine. It's a problem. People familiar with the events told the Daily Beast that Onyshenko's outreach appeared to be part of an effort to secure a U.S. visa. We just don't know why so far. In recent years, OAN has tried to outpace Fox News, Fox Business, and Sinclair as the most committed Trump ally in television. Beyond traveling with Giuliani on his latest European jaunt in hopes of scoring dirt on Trump's political enemies, the network has run countless hours of explicitly pro-MAGA programming and has even taken the step of naming the alleged whistleblower whose complaint triggered the impeachment inquiry, a step that Fox brass have repeatedly instructed their own staff not to take. And Trump has noticed. The president has tweeted praise of OAN's coverage while chastising Fox News for being insufficiently supportive of him. He also privately recommends the network to total strangers at Mar-a-Lago. The network's efforts on Onashenko's behalf raise ethical questions, according to journalism professor Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University. This sounds like it's kind of a gray area. He says if they're just helping them come over to the U.S. for a short period of time to be interviewed and participate in a story, maybe that doesn't bother me as much. But if this is some sort of long-term arrangement where the Ukrainians would be able to stay in the U.S. a long time, this is something they've been wanting to do, for their own reasons, I guess, and OAN is making it happen for them, that would probably be going too far. I'm not really comfortable with any of this, but as long as it's for a short-term purpose, namely the story, I'm not going to get all outraged about it either. So, okay, mixed, I guess that makes a certain amount of sense, although really, I don't know why they would necessarily need them here, but, television production decisions, not up to me. All right, well, all of that goes on in the background of all the other Ukrainians involving themselves in everything here in the United States. Time now, though, for us to depart and to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Plenty to cover, I am sure. Lindsey Graham makes his news roundup. He didn't get enough airtime to attack the FBI, and that has Trump complaining to everybody. What do you think?
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Little international news as usual on Justice's program. Chile's former interior minister is stripped of his right to hold public office for failing to prevent human rights abuses by security forces during months of violent protests. There's much more, of course, in his roundup of the news domestically and around the world. Stay tuned.